Hi there, and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Rusty, and this is me channel where I talk about my favorite horror movies, and or my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And we are going to continue on with the second installment of the Robert the Doll franchise, and it's a movie called The Curse of Robert. Now, The Curse of Robert was released in 2016, a year after the first one. Is written and directed by Andrew Jones and stars Chris Bell, Lee Bane, Tiffany Cyril, and who's that cutie? Jason Homewood. He's the eye candy. He plays Kevin. And as I talked about in the last movie, I really liked the last movie, but it had content issues as far as I was concerned. Um, and I loved everything about it, but I just wanted to see more, like give me some content. So we now have the second installment, which he seemed to, maybe from feedback or something, I don't know. But he definitely upped the stakes in the second one. The first one was like a little bit more supernatural, and you know, and this one he kind of like he left the supernatural, but he added some like it was a little bit more slasher like, which I liked. So this particular installment was a little bit more slasher like, which I liked. The movie opens with some creepy guy, um, a cop, the devil, a cop, like comes into the back seat of this creepy guy's car, and the guy pays him some money, and the guy gives him the doll. So he was a cop that had stole it from the evidence room and had sold it to this guy, whom we later find out's name is Barrison. So, you know, um, it picks up obviously after the last movie. And so far, these movies are all connected. So it's like installments into one big long story, which I love that. So once I saw that this movie was indeed carrying on from the original story, I was like, okay, cool, that's good. Cause so he's building a mythology up here, and so once we see that scene, we find out we meet Emily. Now Emily is driving to work. She gets to work at a museum, and she goes in and is introduced to Kevin, Stan, and Ethel. Ethel is the other cleaning night crew cleaning person, and Stan and Kevin are the night security guards for this museum. As Ethel takes her around and shows her the place, we realize that Kevin is on display, just like he is at that museum in real life in QS. So, see, the guy's keeping it attached to reality, which I think is kind of cool. But so Kevin is in this museum, and what's interesting about it is that it incorporates some of the same real life stuff. There's a little plaque on the front of his display case that says, "Always ask Robert's permission before you take a photo." And they talk about that. Ethel tells Emily about it. So you're like, I like the way he's incorporating some of the real life stuff around this doll into a movie. So, once we meet all three of them, we kind of get a little taste of who these people are. And it kicks off pretty quickly. She starts doing her job. There's banter between them all. She is kind of spooked by Robert. Robert is, of course, getting out of the case, and he is like running around in the middle of the night, um, kind of, following them, stalking them, things like that, while they carry on about their business. And it kicks in pretty quickly that this is happening. So it doesn't take long before she's like starting to really get spooked by this doll, um, and this situation. And you can tell that she's attracted to Kevin. So there's that little romantic angle, but it doesn't go too deep, thank God. But so we see Kevin and Stan. It doesn't take too long, like I said, before action starts because we see Stan. And this was I really like the way the director filmed this scene, Stan's scene, because he, is going to go. It's 1:30, so he is going to go do a walkabout and do the rounds of the museum. So he leaves Kevin alone, and the cleaners, they're off doing their thing, and Stan is going through the museum, and it really is. The director does a really good job in that it it kind of gets a little creepy with Stan walking around in the dark, um, with his flashlight, and all the exhibits and stuff like that into these weird little hallways, and you do feel a little claustrophobic. And he gets to Robert's display, and the chair is empty. Now, right before that, when he was coming down the hall, he got frightened, a jump scare by the little plastic bags you get at the grocery store, the little plastic bags that you take your groceries out in. One of those blew across the floor, and it was actually a little jump scare. And I've never been jump scared by a plastic bag, so that was kind of neat. But he goes up, and that's when he sees that Robert is not in the case, and it freaks him out, and he drops his light. So he's in complete darkness, and you hear him fumbling around, trying to find it, and he gets his hands on it, and I guess he stands back up, and he turns the light back on, and when he does, Robert's like right here, right, and puts the plastic bag over his head that you had gotten jump scared a while ago, and suffocates the bitch. so, so we have Stan dead already, and now that he's dead, killed by the plastic bag, Kevin goes looking for him, finds him, yells. The two girls, Ethel and Emily, come running, and they have to call the police. So you have this detective who's part of the story. They have to be interviewed, of course, because what happened, right? This guy was suffocated with a plastic bag. It's not like he tripped and bumped his head. So you've got the cops all suspicious, and Ethel, Emily, and Kevin are interviewed by the devil. Um, Emily then admits to Kevin that she believes all this stuff about the curse because they're freaked out, and the next day they're talking, and she sort of admits to Kevin that she has been starting to fall for it, I guess you would say. That there was something, all the noises, all the somebody stalking you through the museum, but there's nobody there. So she has started, sort of like the mom did in the first one, she has started believing that maybe this curse is real, that there's something to it. So it's blocking my notes. So we next get Ethel's scene the next night, the very next night. I have to wonder if I would have went to work back at that place. But the next night we have Ethel. Now Ethel, she is doing her little cleaning thing, and she sees a shadow, and clickety clockety as somebody goes running by, and she gets curious, and she gets up and she goes looking for this individual, and she goes into the storeroom and finds the toolbox is open and all the tools are thrown all over the floor. So she's like, oh man, and she starts picking it up, and next thing you know, you hear her screaming, and Kevin and Emily come running, and they find her with a screwdriver sticking out of her head. So, like I said, content wise, things have changed. We saw the attack on Stan. Quick, flashy, but cool. We do see a little bit of gore. We do see the screwdriver and blood. The screwdriver is sticking out of Ethel's head. So now you're down to just Kevin and Emily. So you can imagine what the cops, you know, the detective is like, really? And somebody did what? And now, well, I'll get to that later. I started to say, and this is where a complaint comes, but I'll do the complaint at the end. But so Kevin and Emily are interviewed once again. The cop, of course, is now getting very suspicious, especially since Emily, she doesn't know what else to do except to tell him the truth. And that is that she starts telling him that she thinks the curse of Robert is real. Try telling that to a cop. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but she just didn't know what else to do, right? So that's what she tells the cop. And she gets the reaction that you would expect. So her and Kevin start talking about, what they're going to do. And she's like, well, I'm really thinking about quitting. And he's like, well, I can't quit because I've got bills to pay. And she's like, so do I. But, which would be my answer, I would be like, yeah, I got bills to pay. And, I don't want to not pay my bills to the point of go ahead and kill me so I don't have to pay them. I mean, I can't pay my bills if I'm dead, so it's like, but she has looked up, so him and her are like researching, and they have looked up and they find out the story about Robert from the last movie. So when they find the news reports about this kid who had killed his father, attacked the maid, because now you find out that from the first movie, Gene has been accused of all of it. Of course, he was accused of chasing the babysitter home and killing her. He was, convicted, really. He was convicted of killing the babysitter, pushing the maid down the stairs, and stabbing his father to death. And we know he stabbed his father to death, so you kind of get confirmation of that, and I really appreciated that because it was really hooking these two movies together. So they go and they come up with the idea that they want to go and talk to Jen, who is in a mental institution. And I'm like, cool. I mean, they're gonna actually bring the mom from the first one. So they go, and it is her, and they go and see her at the mental institution. They tell her what's going on, and of course the mother believes them because she experienced the same thing. So she, starts telling them the story about that we learned from the first movie about Robert Crowe, but then she said there was other stuff to it. So they added to the mythology by letting you know that not only was that stuff that you learned true, but that it wasn't um, Agatha who had done that. That yeah, she dabbled in voodoo and stuff, but that it was her brother. That she had a brother called Amos Blackwood, I think. Yes, Amos Blackwood was her brother, and it was him. He was the one that revived the spirit in Robert the doll. And so they learn this new stuff, and they start thinking that Barrison, the guy that owns the museum, that he is the one, he is Amos, and that he knew what he was doing and that he did this. But they need to prove it, because you have to think they're also trying to clear their name, right? Because they're being suspected of killing Ethel and Stan. So, both of them are suspects in a murder. So they are trying to figure out what the hell to do. Now they've talked to her. They think that maybe Barrison is this Amos Blackwood, that he may be of the right age to have been that Agatha woman's brother, and that he's the one who did it, and he knows all about it. So they come up with this little plot to, blackmail him into telling the truth, because they know that something had to happen to the CCTV tapes of inside that museum that could have proved that something else was going on. So they contact him. They come up with this little plot. They contact him, and they get, to see if it's true by first of all going, hey, I got the tape, is what Kevin tells him. That he's got the tapes. And the guy kind of like, how did you get the tapes when I know they were taken out before the cops even knew to ask for them, which gave it away right there. So Kevin's like, aha, I knew it. You took the tapes because there's something on them. Well, I downloaded the tapes to my phone, to my mobile. And, I've got this stuff on my mobile, and you can have it, and we won't say anything if you'll give us $100,000. That's not really their motive, because they were going to go to the cops after this, but they knew that he would think they needed to have a motive. So the motive was $100,000. He admits to come to the museum to exchange the money for the footage that Kevin had downloaded. So they get there, and before they go there, though, they do go to the cops, and they go to the cop and they tell them what they're going to do. And the cop's like, yeah, y'all are just upset because you're suspects, and this is kind of dangerous. And he said, but, okay, I don't believe your shit about this doll, okay? But if you find out that he took the CCTV tapes, then he has tampered with evidence of a major crime, 2 murders. So we can look into it if this works out. I wouldn't do it if I was you, but hey, I understand you're trying to save your asses. So they go and they have this confrontation with him. Now he says he's got the money. Kevin is like, we will exchange the mobile and the money at the same time. And she also accuses him of being this Amos Blackwood. So they go to this meeting, and they do the trade-off. Now she does say, I know that you're Amos Blackwood, and he literally really doesn't know what she's talking about, and that is true. He did know about the curse. He is using it to make money. He thinks that the footage that he had, if it, would actually, he didn't want it solved, is what I'm saying, is he wants people to still believe the doll is haunted, real or not. So you don't really know whether he believes it or not. You only know that he doesn't give a shit. He didn't want to give the CC tapes up, because if there is something on there, he doesn't want it explained. He wants people to think it was the doll. So they don't really, he didn't really let you know whether or not there was something on there that would disprove or prove it. So instead of being money in the envelope, there was paper cut to look in the shape of money. So Kevin the air conditioner was on. So Kevin was like, wait a second, what is this? I'm fucking gonna kill you, And that's when Barrison pulled out a gun. So he pulls out a gun, and he's like, you're not gonna kill anyone, You're just gonna be another part of the story. But before he could do anything, Robert has come up behind him and slashes his leg open. And so okay, Kevin and Emily have all the proof they need now because Robert doesn't mind doing this shit in the open. So he has attacked Barrison. And as he stabbed Barrison, the gun went off and it shot Kevin in the leg. So Kevin, she's trying to help Kevin. They're trying to get out while Robert's back there slicing up, Mr. Barrison. And all of a sudden, all the lights go out. They're fumbling around with their phone lights and all, trying to find a way out. He's fucking bleeding to death and stuff like that. I guess Robert has cut the lights, cut the power. So they're finding their lights and they're shining it around. And all of a sudden, Robert appears by Kevin and slices his throat. And I'm like, motherfucker. If you've watched my channel for long enough, you know how pissed off I am at every cute guy that I like in a horror movie gets killed. I think the only horror movie, well, the original Scream, um, who was it? Oh God, I lost his name. But he lives to the second one anyway. But I guess the first Final Destination, my crush was him, the star, and he lived through it. So that's probably about the only one I can think of. If I like them, they're dead. That's all there is to it. So anyway, Kevin gets his throat cut. He's bleeding to death. He's gone. She's freaking out. Robert comes after her. Manages to find this big, giant butcher knife looking thing. And as Robert comes around the corner to get her, she literally slices him in half. Like, slices him in half. And what was weird about it is that his insides were like meat. They looked like a piece of beef. You know what I mean? So I thought that was weird. That it looked like meat was inside of him. Sort of like Child's Play, I guess, at the end, when he was like becoming real. And so that was not new. But so she goes out after doing that. She kind of walks down the hall and like passes out. And that's when she wakes up in the hospital. So she wakes up in hospital and the detective is sitting there by her and she wakes up and she's like, am I alright? Where am I at? And she's like, looks at him and he's like, is Kevin dead? And he's like, yes, and so is Mr. Barrison. And then she starts, telling him that Robert done it and what happened. And his reaction to the stuff that she says, sort of like, he's like, really? Is that so? And she's like, oh my gosh, you're not here to see if I'm okay, are you? And he's like, nope. And then he starts reading her, the warrant. And she is now arrested for murder, for murdering them all. She is. So we've got Gene from the first movie. He's in, GV until he goes to regular prison. The mom's in the mental institution, and now here we have Emily, who's being blamed for all of these murders. And then the outro starts taking place, and you're inside of a toy maker's workshop where you're like, you see someone arrive at this workshop, and it turns out to be the detective that you had seen earlier with the detective, not the one that arrested her, but his partner. So you see him, and he's got a suitcase with him, and he looks at this really old, funky-looking man who kind of looks like Einstein, with the bald head and the big puffy white beard and these white tufts sticking out the side of his head, and he gives Robert the doll to this toy maker, and who starts repairing him. and it's like, oh no, look what they've done to you, my little child, and stuff like that. And he starts repairing him, and after he gets him all repaired and everything, he does some kind of spell over him with a book, and I guess that heals him or something, helps heal him, and he puts him up on the shelf. And then what was weird is while he was sitting up on the shelf, um, there was a couple of dolls over here, and their heads turned and looked at him, and he turned his head and he looked at them, you know, and the guy was like, you know, to welcome back home, and he said, now let the games begin, and that movie ended. So this was a big improvement content wise over the first one. I love the way that it continued the story. It incorporated the first story into it. Um, it was really like watching one continuous story, and I liked that. Uh, I was now interested in the mythology. I was now interested in this franchise with the second one. I was eager to watch the third one after seeing this one because I had a feeling that it would either continue or be related. You know, that this I was getting a feel of where this franchise is going so far, anyway, and it had piqued my interest. Like I said, the only thing that bothered me about the first one was the lack of content, lack of horror content. The idea was there, but not the execution. This one, though, it had the execution acceptable enough to me. My only complaint about this movie, you know, I gave it a 6 out of 10. My complaint about this movie is that I do not like short movies. And this movie is only, you know, without credits. Without credits, this movie is only like 119 minutes, or I mean an hour and 19 minutes. So I wish it was 119 minutes, but it's only like an hour and 19 minutes. So that's what, 79 minutes. That's not acceptable to me for a horror movie. But what of it was great, and I really loved it. I did like this. So it jumped up, you know, to a like 6.2 or something like that, 6.6 out of 10. The first one, I don't like horror movies that, you know, that's why I hated Prom Night, the remake of Prom Night so much, is because, you know, I don't want to see a kiddie movie called a horror movie. So, and even the unrated version of the remake of Prom Night was crap and showed very little more. I mean, at least enough to be acceptable, but, you know, so, yeah. Curse of Robert, 2016, continued the story. I really liked the way it added to the mythology. Cinematography was interesting. Once again, the actors were, I have to give him credit. He finds decent actors that do not in any way seem to be B-movie actors or anything. I was wondering if they showed the budget. Sometimes they do, but they didn't. They don't. Okay. So there was no budget listing on this, but it's obviously low budget, but it worked. It worked fine. So I liked the second installment. It was really cool. I was very interested to see the third one, and I like the third one even more, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So that was The Curse of Robert, the second movie. This is the triple feature box set. Um, so yeah, The Curse of Robert, 2016. I liked it a great deal, and I like this franchise so far. And yep, I will see you in the next one where we will talk about it. Tried not to make these too super long. So I will see you next time. Always remember, yes, we're going to do it. No matter what the world is doing to you or about you, you are a very special and unique person. I appreciate you stopping by. I appreciate you taking a look and listening. If you got anything to say, comment, ask questions, whatever, I am fine. I don't care. Look, I wear knee socks. So, I love it. Be a unique person. Don't follow fads. Be your own self. Love it. And I will see you next time. Keep screaming when appropriate, or they might section you. I'll talk to you in just a few minutes, or actually tomorrow. But I'm going to film it in just a few minutes. Bye bye.